Welcome to the Comic Binge. I am your host, Paul Herman, and thank you so much for all the people who have subscribed to the channel, who have liked the videos and left love notes, aka comments to us. Super appreciate it. And today we're going to be talking about some good old Avengers comic books, and not just any Avengers comics, but the recent series by Jed MacKay, the writer anyway. And again, I will talk about the artist as well because I always forget people's names. Everyone knows this, but thank you so much for joining us again. Super appreciate everyone does. Go ahead and hit the like button, leave a love note, interact with the videos to get more people involved with the Comic Binge, and get the channel out there so we can get more comic book viewers and get more people who are into comics or want to get into comics, because the whole point of the binge is to get people into reading. And so today, yes, we are going to be talking about the Avengers new series by Marvel Comics. This came out this last year, and we're going to analyze a little bit about what makes this series work, or if it doesn't work. I don't know. Chris will be joining us here a little bit later. He's playing dad, but I am not alone. I am here with a old buddy of mine, Mr. Ricky Church. How are you doing today, Ricky?
I'm good. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for letting me throw you a curveball. For people who don't know, Ricky wanted to talk about some other DC comics, which again, we will talk about that at some point other time, Ricky, I promise. But the one thing I realized, I'm like, man, there's not a lot of we haven't done a lot of Marvel comics lately, and I'm a Marvel zombie, so it just felt wrong for me not to talk about Marvel more. So, and I read mostly Marvel anyway, but I thought about it, I'm like, well, what'd be a good thing to kind of get people into the channel, and obviously with Loki coming out, like what's a good thing to kind of talk about with everything? And it kind of dawned on me, I'm like, oh yeah, there's that little Avengers series team up, that team that's kind of got rebooted recently. And yeah, it was one of those things where it kind of made a lot of sense to talk about the Avengers series that just got basically not a boy. And I'll kind of throw it to you in a second here, Ricky, but like I just want it felt natural and perfect to talk about this series. But anyway, we'll just kind of talk to Ricky a little bit, kind of get his ideas about comics in general before we get into the main gist. But Ricky, I've known you for a while through like the circles of Modern Myth Media, to with stuff with Sean, to Star Wars. You write for Flickery Myth. I know you like comic books. You told me before the show, and kind of reiterated to me that you mainly are a DC guy. But what are some of your favorite comic stories? It could be DC, whatever. Like, what are the main ones? If someone asked you favorite, three, not five, three favorite Star Wars comics, three favorite comic books, whatever, go.
Oof.
Put you on the spot.
All right, so Justice, which we'll hopefully talk about at some point later.
Yes, we will.
I would say Batman Year One, or no, Long Halloween. Batman Long Halloween, classic. And All-Star Superman.
All right, I've never finished All-Star Superman. Not because I didn't like it. I got it. I was getting it while it was coming out originally, like 20 years ago now. God, it's a long time ago.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's that old. And I just never finished picking it up. And I know everyone talks about it's a classic, and I just never got around to finishing it. And I know I will one day. So anyway, all right. So you would say, who's your favorite comic writer?
Comic writer. Grant Morrison, maybe. Yeah,
that one. Okay.
Yeah, or him or Scott Snyder, because I like
Scott Snyder.
I like all of Scott Snyder, or like most of Scott Snyder's superhero stuff. Like when he's done Batman and his little bit of Superman, but then his like other non-superhero stuff, because he writes a lot of horror stuff. So American Vampire is great, and I know he's got some like other horror themed stories out right now, which I haven't dived into yet. But I'd say Morrison or Snyder.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna ask you. So you read American Vampire? You recommend it?
Yeah, it's really good. And if you're a Stephen King fan too, he co-wrote the first American Vampire arc to like help set the tone for it and stuff. So it's
Real Stephen King did, huh?
yeah.
I didn't
So
know that. Interesting. Okay.
yeah,
Yes, Scott Snyder is one of those writers that I don't think he's a bad writer, but I don't generally gravitate towards his material. No, I haven't read American Vampire. And I haven't read Black Mirror, which everyone raves about.
oh, it's so good.
Everyone raves about Black Mirror, and I need to. I have it. Chris gave it to me. But yeah, like I'm unfortunately I have not done that yet. So, bye Andrew. We love you, bro. But no, like it's one of those things where it's a blind spot for me to not have read that yet. But I think I'm gonna save it for the binge at some point. We can talk about it because I know it's a Dick Grayson story and I've heard great things about it. So yeah. So we'll see about that. Yeah, Scott Snyder. Did you like Superman Unchained? That's another book that Chris gave me that I haven't read yet.
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was good. It took me a little to get into. Because it's slightly different than like like at the time that he wrote that he was doing Batman, so it's
right. He got
different tone. Like obviously it's Superman and Batman, they have different tones already, but
sure,
it's like a different kind of tone than what his Batman was going for, and different like feel of like the speed and pacing of it. But it picked up after a bit and was pretty good. And and the art is Jim Lee. Like,
Jim Lee.
You can't go wrong with Jim Lee. There's, in fact, I won't spoil it for you whenever you read the book, but there's a spread of some stuff going on in the Batcave, which is really cool. Jim Lee has a funny anecdote of it where when he read the script of like what Snyder was saying would be going on in this spread, Jim Lee emailed him back and was like, "I hate you." So, just because it's so cool and detailed, but would have been a lot of work, I imagine.
Well, you're Jim Lee and you're a workman, and he probably knows how to cut some corners here and there, and so all that. So so today we're gonna be talking about Jed McKay and CF Villa. Thank you. I went to look at the name before I forgot, because the art for the Avengers is important, which we'll get into this series here in a second. But to kind of set the table, again, I'm very, very happy we've gotten this series reboot, because Jason Aaron had started writing the series back. We were talking about Hickman before, almost around the same time. I want to say around. No, he might have been before that. No, he's before that actually, because I want to say it was Celebration, like after Rogue One came out. Because I remember I brought some of the issues with me, or I read them digitally for Jason Aaron's run, because it just started. And it was Ed McGuinness was the artist.
Yeah, I think he was directly after Hickman. I think when Secret Wars wrapped up.
You're right, around that time frame. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, and Jason Aaron had a very long run on the series, and I'm not a Jason Aaron basher. I actually really liked his series initially. I thought it was interesting because his lineup was very unconventional, because it was Cap, Iron Man, Thor, but then I had Ghost Rider, She-Hulk. I forgot the other. I did not like Blade in the series. I thought Blade was an unnecessary thing, in my opinion. So
I kind of forgot he joined the team for time, which is really out there.
Not really my thing, So hello there, Pete. I love you, buddy. Pete, get on like a different work schedule so you can get on the show. You know what? God. Anyway, but yeah, but it wasn't bad. But the thing was, I'd always I just kind of fall off, because it wasn't always super mega interesting, in my opinion. I liked some of the threads he was going for, but it never quite got my attention completely either. So Every once in a while I hear a couple things about it. I like the whole Avengers AD or BC, excuse me. Avengers BC was a very interesting idea, I thought. I like that idea. That's pretty cool. I meant to go I honestly actually meant to go reread comics or reread some of that run for that main reason, to be honest. Um, so yeah, like I like that stuff, but it never connected with me. Never did. Did you ever read any of his stuff at all on Avengers?
I might have read like a little bit at the start, but I didn't stay on it for very long, and then I just kind of kept up with like some of the main events that were going on, just through hearing about them through the grapevine, like what Civil War II was, and some of the other things that were going on at the time. But no, I never read his run in full or know like a lot of the other details about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
too sure on that one.
Well, I'll just say this: I am one of those people who thought it kind of Avengers kind of maybe has suffered a little bit because he was on the book for so long, almost too long, you could say.
Mhm.
Maybe again, that's just my opinion. Um, yeah, it wasn't the best. I don't think. I think it gets dumped on for the name alone because the
Mhm.
idea is kind of interesting. I thought, to be honest. But
Yeah.
yeah, the name alone gives it a negative connotation because it's a sequel.
Yeah.
But if you would have called it something else, it might be more successful. I don't know. I liked it. I thought it was
Yeah.
interesting.
Mhm.
It's not the best. It's just I don't think it's complete a waste. It's just not the greatest. That's my opinion. But yeah, like I felt like when you have a writer on a comic series in a single issue comic series, that is, where you're in it's a the thing we kind of forget, I think, as comic fans, especially for mainstream comic fans, for Marvel and DC, is that we it's way more of a creative assembly line than any other medium of art out
Mhm.
there because because it's such a routine monthly thing.
Mhm.
It's Tom King kind of likened it to like blue collar like creative, and it's like, yeah, because it's like you got to bring it in, and you guys got to do it, and then close a chapter and go move on to the next one, move on to the
Mhm.
next one, move on.
Yeah.
That's what makes monthly comics, I should say, because graphic novels it's a little different, or a lot different in that aspect, I would say. But monthly comics is different because you have a limited amount of pages, and you've got to wrap it up in a certain time. It's very much like a TV series, but it's even faster than a TV series
Yeah.
because in a TV series you have like downtime, leg time. If you're an ongoing writer, it's
Yeah.
you got to keep churning it, and you don't have a team of writers usually to go with. You have maybe an editor, so a couple editors, and that's it. So anyway, yeah, it just felt way too long for me. So what you read comics, do you tend to like, I mean, just give me your honest opinion here in general. Do you like long runs for writers, or do you kind of tend to go back, in and out of them? Or I mean, where do you when you like a writer, do you tend to like their long runs, or yeah, kind of dive into that a little bit? I'm just curious.
Yeah. I think it depends for me on on who the writer is, and I guess the story they're telling.
Sure.
Like Tom King's run on Batman, I kind of fell out of about midway through. Um, got a little back into it later, but yeah, like his run started off well and it was interesting, but then like midway through it kind of like my interest in it dropped a bit because it started getting a little too out there a bit, and then
When you
I
say
know.
out there, I'm curious because I think this is where a lot of writers start to go when they get their midpoint of their run.
Mhm.
If they're or let's say in Tom King's case or even Jason Aaron's case, that there's a point where like that mid run they start trying to do different things.
Yeah.
And which again, I don't like look down on any writer for trying those things, but how would you describe like out there, like in general terms, I would say.
Well, I'd say it kind of like what you just said about where they try starting doing things differently, because start of Tom King's Batman run was like very straightforward. You know, the first couple arcs are like all connected. You know, he meets a couple of new heroes and then has to go like rescue, kind of like find a cure for one of them from Bane, and it's all pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But
Which
then
I Am Suicide's great. I like all that stuff too.
yeah. Like that's all like some great storytelling there. But then you get into like, okay, now he's traveling the world with Catwoman to like do things for their like engagement, and
Sure.
but then he has like a side adventure with Wonder Woman, and then a double date with Superman and Lois Lane, which, and that was a really fun issue. But then he gets later like stuck in this like dream world for like 6 issues, which in publication time is 6 months. So it's
Right.
like 6
Wasn't it
months.
bi-monthly though?
I think at that point
It had.
they had gone back to monthly.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think
And see that
because it was bi-monthly
for a
for a
bit.
long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, by that time I think they switched all the titles on DC Rebirth to back to monthly.
Yeah.
At least for certain titles. And I think for Tom King, he went back to monthly. At least at that point. So it was it was a little difficult to follow with such a like, and like I said, that like it was that point after the wedding got broken off that like he started to do like even more kind of experimental
Sure.
things to
Yeah.
change it up.
And that's what it felt like what Jason Aaron was doing on Avengers, the same
Mhm.
thing. Like he just really started incorporating these different, all that stuff with who's the new Phoenix and who's this and he
Mhm.
brought in, it gets really complicated. And I don't it felt like it was just kind of we got to keep sales up, and sales were I think pretty solid on the series for the long, because I don't think he stays on the series very long if it doesn't have some stability. Which
Mhm.
you can look at the numbers. I'm sure I'm probably wrong in some way on that, but you get what I'm saying. There
Yeah.
has to be some stability there or some consistency where they know like. Yeah, we could reboot with a different writer, but then like the sales are just going to do this again. Like that's because how comics work. They
Mhm.
always start strong at the very beginning and just tail off. It's that gradual like decline / where's the bottom, and if that bottom is higher then whatever,
Yeah.
right, you stay on it.
And like the other thing about long runs is once you get to that certain point, like a midway kind
Mhm.
of thing, like in the case of King or Aaron or especially Grant Morrison, it's hard to jump into like the next story arc. Like if
Mhm.
you're a new reader to it, it's hard to jump in and just kind of catch up quickly. Like I remember way back, when Morrison was doing Batman,
Mhm.
I started reading that, but I only started reading it like I guess around the time of Batman R.I.P. And I had to, and that was like the climax of his first act, so I had to like kind of go like catch up quickly and go back to, because like that arc was paying off of like everything that was coming before in his
But
run so far.
well, and
But
here's the thing though too. They could piggyback because this is what the title of the show is called, Jumping On Point. And
mhm,
to use Grant Morrison, he was very smart of having it as an act. And I think
yeah,
an act, one act, second act, third act, because the thing is, I started reading Batman comics with Grant Morrison because of Batman and Robin,
yeah,
and when Dick Grayson became Batman, and they had all that tied in together to that jumping on point of when Dick Grayson became Batman. And
mhm,
that's the thing, you have to, we talk about creating jumping on points. They don't always have to be, a brand new number one, though it helps. It
yeah,
doesn't. It's not a necessity in my opinion. And this is where I would say I think Jason Aaron run probably had the most problems is that it
Mhm.
was an ongoing thing. You could, and the nice thing is today, you can go on to these different comic places and get caught up. If you want to read Marvel Unlimited, or if you want
Mhm.
to go on to Hoopla or Comixology or whatever, right? Like you're gonna
Yeah.
have the opportunities to go do that, but at the same time, you got to make it exciting and have give them a reason to come on. Not just be like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I
Yeah.
heard good things about this," and you look at issue 35 and you're like, "I don't know what the hell's going on."
Yeah.
Like you look back and go, "What?" Now, granted, I've always pushed back on the whole. I need a jumping on point. You can just pick up a
Mhm.
comic sometimes and get a gist and just get an
Yeah.
idea if maybe you like where
Or
where.
like if
Good.
you want to jump on, then at that point there'll be a trade or two out that you can pick up and
Right.
read, and
Yeah.
then you can do the monthly reads.
Yeah, exactly. Pick up a trailer. Like, I always tell people, look what looks interesting. Look, if something looks like it's interesting to you, whether it be like the first comic or like the eighth comic, like go
Mhm.
check it out. Like don't like see if it's worth your while. Look at it. I mean, that's how I got into comics. I wasn't like there's no
Yeah.
jumping on point for me when I was a kid. I was buying them in
Yeah.
the spin racks.
Yeah. No, I like my big entry into comics was it was three major things: Nightfall, Death of
Oh yeah,
Superman, and
yeah,
Clone Saga.
yeah.
None of those three stories are very good jumping on points from a
No,
like
for new
a
readers, no.
story
But
perspective. But
but
like it was fun. Like I
yeah,
didn't care. Like at that age, I just picked it up and was like, oh, what's going on in their worlds now? And
exactly. And I think that's where people, I think today, people always have to feel that there's that time that they don't feel weird and like, I feel awkward. It's like sometimes you got to jump in,
yeah.
just jump in and figure it out. So, we're talking about this jumping on points because when Jason Aaron was announced he's coming off and they had they hadn't, they announced this writing team like kind of out of nowhere,
Mhm.
or this creative team. I don't really follow like news stuff very much. I try to stay away from news stuff, but I remember if in a channel I love that does comics, which is very sometimes can be controversial, is Comics by Perch.
Mhm.
Perch is I love Perch. I don't agree with everything he says, but he's tied into the industry, and he's said a couple different times on his different like videos that the original writer for Avengers, or Jed McKay, who's the writer now, was never meant to be the original writer
Mhm.
for who's to replace Aaron. And he's never said this. I assume I probably was Donnie Cates, whatever his name is, the guy who
Mhm.
did Venom,
Yeah.
because he got into a car accident and kind of fell off for a while, rightfully so, because he got injured and he just
Yeah.
couldn't.
Yeah.
So, but that he didn't announce that himself until
Mhm.
recently. He just kind of like disappeared, and then all of a sudden, Jed McKay's on the book, got announced on the book, and I'll get to
Mhm.
him in a second. But it was just interesting. Like all of a sudden, like Avengers, I'm like, okay, because I honestly, and I love it. I love the Avengers in movies and things like that, and I love the Avengers in the comics in the context of the Marvel universe because they're
Yeah.
always like the big team. Even when the X-Men
Yeah.
were huge, the Avengers were always the team.
Mhm.
Even though even as a kid, X-Men were more popular than anything on this planet. The Avengers were always the 616 like premier
Yeah.
team. Like you know what I mean?
Mhm.
That makes sense. Um, so and I've always liked them. I've read their comics, but I never was a huge fan of them until Bendis came on and basically wrote JLA Avengers, which is
Mhm.
the new Avengers series, which
Yeah.
is all like which is basically what Grant Morrison did, but
Yeah.
with on the Avengers, which
Mhm.
again very cool. Um, so Avengers has to really get me going to like has to be really interesting idea and premise and story
Mhm.
to keep me engaged, right?
Yeah.
And when so I did not care who was taking over for the Avengers. And Chris Clow's here. Chris will
Uh,
sorry, Chris. I forgot you have your own powers here. Chris, I'll throw it to you in a second here, but I'm just finishing my little diatribe. So what I'm just kind of like doing the Avengers thing, and I know Chris, I think you collected majority of the Jason Aaron run, and I think if I'm not mistaken, but we'll get you in a second. So as I'm trying to go through all my this what books I'm going to be picking up, whatever. Um, New Avengers gets announced. Our new Avengers team is going to be announced. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's par for the course, whatever. And then they announced Jed McKay, And Jed McKay and Pete's been trying to get me to read his Black Cat run forever, which I'm going to do eventually for you, Pete. I promise. But Jed McKay, I've only, he's kind of done some work here or there, like kind of periodically. And then all of a sudden, I've heard good things about Black Cat. And then he starts writing some great stuff like the Taskmasters miniseries. So if you haven't read that, that is fantastic. And he introduces a bunch of new characters in that. He writes a very, very funny Taskmaster, very good, really good paced. I liked it. I'm like, oh yeah, this Jed McKay guy, he seems cool. I know he wrote something else I can't remember off the top of my head that I'm forgetting besides Black Cat, but I know he wrote the Taskmaster series, which is fantastic. And then he got tapped to write the new Moon Knight series. And I have not liked a Moon Knight series really since Jeff Lemire came on and wrote the series. And people have tried writing Moon Knight, and yeah. Jed McKay, I gotta tell you, we're eventually gonna do a whole binge of his Moon Knight run. It's almost done, and it's like 25. It'll be like almost 30 issues long. Again, not super crazy, but his Moon Knight is by far one of the best Marvel books I think being written today. And I always come away really impressed with his stories because they're all like very much contained in one issue. It also drives a narrative, like overall narrative that's being progressing overall, but it's so like little by little, but enough to where you get intrigued by it, and writes really good characters. And he just gets the medium, and they're just really well paced for a 22-page comic book. Just like Taskmaster. And I was like, oh yeah, this Jed McKay guy is pretty damn good. Fast forward to this announcement where he gets announced for Avengers. And I'm like, well, I guess I have to check out Avengers, or at least for a little bit, because Jed McKay's writing it. And I like the Avengers. So what the hell? What do I have to lose? And I was just kind of like, okay, I'll pick. Well, I kind of heard about it. I was like, okay, I should maybe pick it up. And I forgot this book called Timeless got announced. And Timeless is one of those things where I was like, oh, Kang. Well, that makes sense, right? Like Kang's the the new Marvel universe, MCU, whatever, right?
He's the new big bad guy.
Yeah, the big bad, whatever, right? Read this book, and I was like, oh, okay. Because at the very end, I should if I was smart, I would have done this and got the actual picture. But I'll do this anyway. This is what it says. Yeah. So, and I was like, oh, okay. I'm in. I'm really in. I'm going to pick this up. So I started picking up the Avengers right away because I love Timeless. And I'll just I'll get spoiler right now for myself. I love the series. It's only 4 issues in, and that's why this whole thing is called jumping on point. So I'll throw it to you in a second here, Chris. But I just want to end on this, that on my side here, this series is still early. If you like the MCU, I think this is a fantastic time to jump on for many different reasons. And the last thing I'll say on it right now, we'll get deeper into it. I think you guys will kind of agree with me on this. I think the biggest reason why this book is going to be so successful is look at that lineup. It's so basic. And I mean it in the best way possible. It's got 6 people total. That's it. 6 people. And 7. Sorry. 7.
Yeah.
I knew
just double counted. Yeah.
I for some reason missed Captain America in the middle. I don't know how I missed that. I can miss Cap. No, but 7 people is a perfect number, or around that. Around, to me, a team book should have no more than 8 people. I've always kind of thought that 8's way too many. 7, like 8, you can have that if you have the right dynamics. 7, 6, 5, those are to me a perfect amount. And the best part is these are really interesting characters, and they're all pretty well known and very honestly different from each other. So I think this book's a great way to jump on and get into the Avengers, especially with Timeless. We'll get into that in a second. But Chris, tell me your history a little bit with the Jason Aaron run. I know you collect a lot of stuff, but I know you've read a little bit of it. And what's your familiarity with Jed McKay? Chris is frozen, and you're muted. Uh-oh. Yep,
Uh,
can't hear you. Uh-oh. Ricky. So, what do you think about this series here we got? Well, I guess we'll start with yeah. So I told you to read this. Give me your general thoughts, and we'll kind of go issue by issue until Chris gets back.
yeah. So, like I said to you and earlier, I hadn't really read the Avengers since Hickman's run, so and knew only little of the events. Um, so that this being a jumping on point was great for someone like me, because like it literally does not like concern itself with much of like what came before. It's like a totally new story, only like the barest minimum of references to the past, like of what happened with T'Challa. And Timeless itself, like if you are unfamiliar with Kang, um then it's it's a great introduction to who Kang is, what he thinks, how he operates, how much of a threat he is.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, I don't know much about Kang. Kang is a guy I've only seen like little bits of in like some of the cartoon series, or in Hickman's run he had like a very small role a few times. But like I know of him, and then of course now he's like in the MCU as the next big thing. So this was a great spotlight on him and his whole process and like what he's really after. So I really enjoyed Timeless and how it led to the main Avengers series. So just from reading that one issue alone, I was like, okay, I really like the tone of this. And
Mm-hmm.
Jed McKay, he's got a great grasp of like the pacing. And like even for what is it, like a 42-page book or
Yeah.
something, because it's like
Mm-hmm.
double the length. Like there's never a part where I was like, this didn't have to be an exercised issue, like or
No.
the story is getting drawn out. Like it's a really good story that just keeps the pace going and going, and bringing up some really cool new threats
Yeah.
to Kang, because I'm sure if you're like Paul, who knows so much about Marvel and has seen Kang and stuff, like um then seeing him like come up with these crazy like plans of how to escape at the very last second, and like this it's like what he says in Timeless, he's the prey, he's on the run for
Yeah.
like the very first time in however long. So really cool new footing for him
Yeah.
in this book.
Yeah, and I think this is, and if you haven't watched our video, I think last year we had there was a great, a phenomenal miniseries called "Only Myself to Conquer." It's basically like the best jumping on point, or to understand Kang without having to read a stupid Wikipedia article or watch a dumb video on YouTube about and spoiling the whole thing for you. I'm talking about you, comic historian, or I'm sorry, comics explain. Excuse me, comic historian. Yeah, comic historian. Is that his name?
I think
Whatever.
so, something like
Yeah, whatever. Comics. Those guys all suck. Sorry. But not comic book historians. Alex Grant's an angel, and I love him. So, but we'll get to the Avengers. I'm glad. I knew you would like this first issue for sure,
that.
Chris. Now you're back. I'm assuming and you can speak. So what is give me your. I said before I'll set up for you. Give it. Give me your insight on like the Jason Aaron's run, like kind of your familiarity with that series, kind of, and then leading into like this with Jed McKay and what your familiarity with Jed McKay is. Oh, he is. You're muted still.
Yeah. Uh,
Uh-oh. It's okay, man. You're good. We got you back. Don't worry, Chris. We all got you. Uh,
And no worries, Chris.
it's okay, Chris. We love you, man. Don't worry. You got it. You got this. You got this. Here. It's okay. I can't hear it's okay. I can't hear it. All right. All right.
Maybe he can mime it out. Can you mime it out, Chris?
Chris could definitely mime anything. So I guess let me just ask you about these next 4 issues, because Ricky, what did you like the series? Because I don't want to spoil a lot of it. We'll get into some of the timeless stuff, the main like antagonist, you could say, of that Kang is fear of. But overall, because I made you read this, and I made you bought the single physical comic books, which is great, by the way.
Mm.
What is your
no, we can't hear you, Chris.
It's okay. All right, I guess he's gonna just be piling out for the rest of the night. All right, Chris, it's all right, man. We love you. What you bought the comics physically, which is really cool. It seems like you bought all of them physically, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I bought 1 to 3. My store didn't have 4. They ordered it in. I was able to still read it though.
Sure. So so what's your take on this series, man?
It is a lot of fun, and again, like if you have not read the Avengers in like ever or in a long time, then like this really is a great jumping on point for like a new story. And like you said about the small cast, it's really good for that, like for just drawing you in with like each of the characters. Like in the first issue, I like how Carol goes to each one individually and asks them to join in. And to compare it to Hickman's run, which again was kind of the last like Avengers run that I read, the first issue of Hickman's Avengers, not the new Avengers,
but
the
regular series,
that one like starts off with like the first issue is like a roster of like over a dozen or so Avengers.
No, that's so bad. I'm sorry.
And then it just grows and grows and grows. So it's in terms of like reading that story, where you might not have a lot of familiarity with like the characters who aren't the big names. You don't get a whole lot of time with them and stuff. Nope. So I really like this, the introduction in the first issue of Carol going personally to each one. And even then with each one, if you haven't read much Avengers before, her interactions quickly kind of recaps who they are, why she's coming to them. Like Carol makes a brief mention of Civil War II, where they were on opposing sides, and then she makes him and she talks to Black Panther about like why he's kind of considered an outcast right now. So like it does a great job of catching you up on who's who, and especially why. In particular, she when she goes to the Captain Americas, why it's Sam she asks to recruit instead of Steve Rogers, and some solid reasoning there. So it does. The first issue really draws you in and does a great job catching you up on who's who and why they're part of this specific iteration.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, it's all good. It's all good. All right, so what's this? Hey, like a good cornerback in the NFL, they give him a pass, they just forget about it. Next play.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh my God.
Jason Aaron, Jed McKay.
Hello. Yeah. Go. Hi, Ricky. Nice to see you.
Hi, you too, Chris.
You already know Ricky.
Salutations are polite.
No, I'm giving you a hard time, Reverend. You know this. You know this.
Well, I've had a hell of a hard time today. So
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
So what? I'm
Anyway.
sorry. What was your question?
I was just asking about Jason Aaron's run, and then your familiarity with Jed McKay going into this series.
I fell off of Jason Aaron's pretty fast, and it wasn't necessarily because I didn't like what I was reading as much as it just. I feel like it started off pretty strong, and it became
Agreed.
pretty easy to sort of stick with it for I think the first 7-8 issues or what I read, and then it just kind of seemed like it fell into the background. And, you know, a lot of team books are like that. It is very difficult to sort of have your, as a writer at least, an individual voice break through the noise that team books can bring, because ensembles in general are really difficult. You know, I mean, Aaron had the runway to focus on different individual Avengers and different arcs. The indication that I got was that that's not really what he did. He did a lot of really highly ensemble based stories.
He did,
And it works for some people. I'm just personally not sure if that works quite for him. One of the reasons that I love Ed Brubaker as much as I do is because when he had Secret Avengers way back in the Heroic Age, the reason he jumped off the book, and I know this because he told me, was because there's too many characters. Like, he likes to give everybody their moment, and that's one of the ways I think that first year of Secret Avengers really did break through the noise. Was not only did you have Mike Deodato, who's an incredible artist, but Brubaker did a good job of creating sort of the tenor that you expect from a team of Black Ops Avengers, especially coming off of stories that were like, it was Dark Avengers was great, but you weren't exactly rooting for those characters. And Brubaker just kind of took it in a more heroic direction, which is one of the reasons I love that. But with the Avengers, as a book overall, there are only like a few writers that I think over the last 25 years or so have really managed to break through and sort of carve an identity where it's clearly defined as, oh yeah, it's that guy's run or it's that person's run. I think Bendis falls into that category. He got long in the tooth, but certainly for most of it, like he batted pretty well for most of the time he was in control of the Avengers books.
I agree.
I would count Hickman there. I actually like more of Hickman's Avengers, I think, than you do, Paul.
I like his new Avengers a lot.
Yeah, I know. I'm talking about.
But his other Avengers is bullcrap. But anyway,
continue. No, it's not. But that's kind of it,
Wish Mark Waid tried to write the Avengers, didn't really hit.
Same thing, though. It was the same thing with Jason Aaron. Like, it started off kind of interestingly, but then it just kind of faded into the background. And part of that is lineup, but a lot of it is just like the approach that the writer brings to the storytelling. I feel like Mark Waid kind of got bored in the latter several years of his time at Marvel, and the Avengers didn't benefit from that. So
yeah, I would agree with that.
Familiarity with Jed McKay is non-existent before I read the first issue.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually the same too. I hadn't really followed much of. Like, I hadn't really heard of him prior to this. So.
I just found out he's from Prince Edward Island. I had no idea. Like,
where?
Prince Edward Island.
Where's that?
Oh, he's Canadian here?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nice. That explains some of the humorous Toronto references. Because I was like, hey, it's Toronto. Hey.
There you go.
Yes.
Yeah. But no, generally speaking, I like the way this started out, but I like a lot of ways that Avengers starts out.
Sure.
There is, I don't disagree with like the scene with the two Captain Americas. Like, I like it in principle, and I love Sam. Like, of course, put Sam on the team. Sam has more than proven his worth as Captain America since Rick Remender put the shield on him, right? Like, and those are great issues too. Maybe Uncanny Avengers would be tossed into what I was talking about before, but the scene itself, as a Steve guy, generally, or the Captain America corner is where I call my home in the Marvel universe. So Sam is absolutely a part of that. But I kind of felt like you don't need to do this to Steve's face. Like, yeah, maybe he's not quite as regular a guy, but he's more regular than most of the people that have been on the Avengers, like in the entirety of the team's existence.
But I think her point was because I think there's more of an equal footing. Like Steve comes with not with baggage, but he comes with that leadership kind of thing. And I don't think Carol would care too much because they worked on a team together, with Jason Aaron's run. It would make more sense if she has the chair, which I love how Jed really does a great job of illustrating in that first issue of the dynamics of the characters. Like you brought up a good point, Ricky, that he alludes to Civil War. He alludes to some of the stuff that's happened in the past without having to oh, here we go.
All that stuff is fine. All that stuff.
No. But what I'm saying is he does a good job of illustrating what her purpose is. Everyone has a very specific role, not as power level. And that's the thing we always got to think of. I always think about as a superhero group, like this is a strong guy. There's this guy, there's this person or this, whatever. Right. And the thing is that he kind of flipped that a little bit on not like the power level of what we think is, but more of there's a little bit of that, but also personality wise, what she needs as the person themselves. Mm-hmm. And she didn't need a Steve Rogers on the team because she already had a lot of big personalities. She needed someone who understood Cap understands people, but Sam works with the people. Sam's a social worker. He understands and knows how to facilitate because she wants to make the Avengers more than what they are. That's the impression that I got from it, especially when you incorporate the T'Challa comes on and everything. I liked how Jed was going with that idea because really I can't understand why you have, you want to give Sam a spotlight because of his movie coming out and everything. That's why he's on the team. But hold on. Last point. But at the same time, he gives a legitimate reason why he's on the team for Carol, and it makes all the sense to me.
Yeah, I just didn't think it did. I don't disagree at all with, again, the end result is totally fine. And Sam is an awesome Captain America, and he does the shield justice, especially in the hands of a solid writer. And I'm not unconvinced that Judd McKay is a solid writer. Like, it's just this moment in particular, the reasoning felt overly contrived. For if you were going to, I don't even really know why Steve needed to be involved in the scene. I probably would have been a little more satisfied if she just went to Sam and said, here's why I want you. And you bring up the idea of baggage. I mean, frankly, look, you're never going to be able to,
that's a bad word for me.
You're never going to be able to convince me that anything that Steve Rogers brings to the table is a negative.
Baggage is a poor choice of word for me.
I think he was maybe included because I kind of see where you're coming from a bit. To me, I think he was included so that way it would be like he gives his blessing for
exactly. Thank you. He's passing the torch, if you will,
and just so that way, there won't be that question hanging over of oh well, why is Steve not on the team? Because he's always he's was the first Avenger. So yeah, and even he says oh yeah, and no offense, and he says Sam's, he kind of echoes Carol's comments that Sam and yours, Chris, that Sam's earned the shield and stuff. So
yeah,
I think it was a good moment for him to be there, so that way there is that they don't have to do an offhand answer in another page of just oh yeah, Steve is okay with it because whatever, he's there, he sees it, he's okay with it, and it gives his own series a bit more meaning, because then that's the Steve Rogers Captain series you can go read if he does have one,
really
right?
good.
Yeah,
it's fantastic
had
too.
one start.
Yeah. So
And-
I think that's the reason why he was in that scene. Like, and I do
Agreed.
see your point that like he didn't necessarily have to be there, but it is the reason why. Like, it helps that scene a lot, at least for me.
Yeah, and I take your meaning, and it's at the end of the day, what it probably is just a question of efficiency. You know, like if
Sure.
if McKay had these questions in his mind when he was composing the scene about, you know, wanting to squash certain questions that could come up later with Steve, then in that respect, I can understand it. But I don't
In
know.
a vacuum, you're not really, just doesn't work for you.
The idea of like needing a blessing, they didn't ask him for one. You know,
But that's not the
matter
point.
of factly.
It's more of like, it's kind of meta, right? Like that's the thing. It's like it's more of like, hey fans, like this is why Cap's not on my team. That to me is why.
I mean, even then, Sam has been Captain America now for nearly a decade.
But
I don't think
they have
that's
they both have strengths and weaknesses. I think that's what.
Yeah, but there. I mean, in terms of like a blessing or something, there's not an anointing that's needed.
It.
You know, it's just
I
like Sam is a Captain
it's
America.
not
Same way
needed.
that
It's not
Miles
needed.
Morales is a Spider-Man. You know, it's
right,
just like,
but it's not needed. But I think to give people a perspective of, because I think he wants to emphasize, because later on, and this is why I think he's a good writer, and this is why I love the series so much, because later on in the great issue between T'Challa and Sam, when they're in this issue, the Impossible City, it's, you know, you get like more of that idea of like a lot more aggressive personality and a less forgiving and a lot more, you know, to me, like put you in your place kind of person like Sam is. And you have more tension between Sam and T'Challa that I think you would have less than with Cap and Steve, or Steven and T'Challa. You know what I mean?
Like
Like
more of a justification in the second issue when he talks the truck driver down from.
but see
going.
that. Sure, but I think Cap could do that too, though, or Steve could. But that's my point is this: is that there's a different dynamic of the people, and that to me is why it's not just because I need, you know, obviously I think we all can agree he's in it because Marvel wants him in the book. Like it wasn't maybe Jed's first choice, but I think in the story, Jed is giving us, I think, a legitimate good reason why, because of the different type of personality that Sam is and represents as Captain America. Because to me, they are more than just their skin color. They are different personalities and what they represent within America. And they both are very important. And I think that in this book, it makes sense in the context of what he's doing. I think thematically makes more sense with Sam than with Cap. So
they are different personalities, but they're also serving the same symbol by the way that they conduct themselves. And the reason why I found the scene in the second issue generally more compelling. In fact, I probably would have preferred, like, that's the first time we actually see Sam in this story, is because it shows that he has this, like, Steve is the tactical leader who can inspire legions of people to go to the gates of hell with him. And, you know, in the right circumstances, maybe Sam could do that too, but that's not like his strong suit necessarily.
No.
Sam's strong suit is that ability to connect on a more personal level at an individual point of view. And I don't know, it's just like, I feel like you could have accomplished the goal of putting Sam on the team without necessarily seeking a blessing from Steve Rogers, which wasn't required. I mean, Steve gave him his blessing repeatedly over the last 9 years.
But it's not. But that's not what we're saying either.
And
it's not. He doesn't need. You're right. He doesn't need it. But it's for the fans. I think to me, it's letting the fans know. You have to take the whole idea of like it's not literally what we're saying he's doing. What he's trying to explain is like Cap being there represents this. You know, him saying and acknowledging. Right. Yes, we know he's a great Captain America. That's not what I'm saying either. He's acknowledging that Sam has a different personality strength, and that makes sense.
Well, Carol acknowledged that.
Well, and so did Steve. And that's the whole point.
Steve didn't really have much to say.
Yeah, he did. He's like, yeah. He's like, I totally get it. Like he's just in total agreement.
That's not a lot to say. I feel like you're applying some of your own perspectives to it.
Of course, I'm applying my own perspective. That's the whole point.
No, it's not the point when you're saying this is what he is thinking. You are ascribing
But
something
because
that
I'm
isn't
projecting
necessarily
what
on
I think he's
page.
thinking because of what like the context of the story and the other issues coming afterwards.
According to you, sure.
Yes, because when I've read the other issues.
That's fine, but it just the reasoning just seemed a little clunky to me, and it called attention to itself. Again,
So,
I'm totally cool with Sam being the Captain
know
America
you
of
are.
this
I
team,
know
and
you
he
are.
should be in perpetuity going forward. But the reasoning just called attention to itself in a way that I found distracting and maybe a little too shortchangey for Steve.
So besides that one thing that you wanted to burn the comic over, what?
I didn't want to burn it over. You're the one who keeps.
I'm
I was just expressing an opinion, and you're like, pop, 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 pop.
Reverend.
But where's my popcorn?
Captain America is my favorite character.
Adam, can you put this in? Adam, can you put this in a clip for me, please? So my question is, did you, besides that one scene with Captain Rogers, which made you want to, tear your heart out? Did you like
Sam?
Listen, answer the question. Do you like this series?
The premise of your question is flawed.
My question is not flawed. I was joking.
The premise of your question is flawed.
Oh my God. Just answer the damn question.
What's the question?
I just asked you like 5 times. Jeez, there's two. Oh God. Do you like where this series is going? We'll get into the details a little. We're going long, but
yeah, sure. But it's the same thing that like I have not yet seen anything that has convinced me that this run on the long term is going to escape the issues that a lot of other ongoing Avengers runs have. I mean, it's the curse of a team book, and I'm totally able and willing to entertain the idea that this could become a timeless Avengers run.
I don't know if it's that. I have no idea if it's. I'm not going to go that far.
Yeah, right. Who could, right? At least reasonably.
Yeah, exactly.
But I love the roster. The idea, particularly of including Wanda as an inspired one, considering the reputation she has cultivated now for most of the last 20 years. So, and considering where they have put her in the MCU, like she's not exactly in first position in a lot of general fans' minds, even if hardcore Marvel readers certainly know what she brings to the table all the time.
Yeah.
Carol being in a leadership position makes total sense. I really enjoyed the scene between she and Tony where she was sort of laying out what her vision for the team would be.
Yeah, me too.
Pun intended.
Yeah, that was great.
But that's a good addition too. Like Vision brings this sort of melancholy, this rather profound sense of melancholy that is still rooted in a desire to be more than he is, and that's something that I really appreciate. You can't. I mean, you have like the core constituencies of the Marvel Universe represented via this lineup. So the lineup is strong. The thematic aims of the storytelling, especially by the time they invoke Kang and go into a little more detail with him in the second issue, that's also cool. But momentum is key in a team book, and I'll be really interested to see if we are still talking about the momentum of the book in a year, if that's how long he's on it for. Like I don't even know if they've laid that out.
Well, and again, like we don't know, and I'm not going to say that this is whatever going to be a timeless classic, but there's the makings of something very interesting because you didn't talk about timeless, and I want to get into that in a minute and talk about as we kind of we'll close to wrap it up here. One of the things I think this is different than other Avengers books is that, and I don't know, and me and Ricky were talking about this before the show, was all these new characters that you're introducing, and we have Murden, right? Like that is one of the most interesting parts about the series that I really like, is that so far, not only in Timeless, we get this new character villain that we don't really know much about, which I already have a guess who this might be. But we'll see. I thought it was very fascinating that they introduced this whole Knights of the Round Table villain, these characters that Murden, looks, has under their disposal. And then you turn around and in the second issue, you throw in more new characters.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's brilliant because what Jed McKay is doing here is in Timeless, you're establishing that, right? But then in this new Avengers series, you're getting to know the Avengers through the new villains, basically. And what I think is so brilliant about it is that it puts everyone on the same level, because the Avengers are on the same level as the reader. Then that way you kind of identify and project more onto the characters, and maybe it's subconsciously. I think you're able to kind of go with the story a lot better, because there's not the baggage. I hate using that word baggage again, but just that whole, here's a history lesson about Kang. Kang, you read Timeless, you get what's going on. And then these new characters are tied with Murden, but where do they tie in together? And they're all very interesting too, but they're also exploiting aspects of every character on the Avengers, which I thought was very interesting. So, and again, I'm curious if this is editorial decision, or is this something all been a brain trust that all created? Is this all Jed McKay? I have no idea. At any rate, I really like what they're going with this. And I think that to me is where the difference is between this and other Avengers runs, is that you can go either way. If you kind of go in the middle, it's really hard to keep that momentum, like you're saying, Chris. But if you go hard, like one way, which is let's say the right side, which would be you go hard, in-depth continuity, bring out some deep cuts, and like go hard with a major Avengers villain, whatever, and try to revamp them, or not revamp, but write an interesting story around them. That's one way to do it. I think it can get people excited again, because people, we all agree. I can agree probably that we like it when stories can use old continuities and really make it richer, right? Or the left side, you could say, is that brand new story, brand new characters, brand new heroes or villains or whatever. It's like it's usually one or the other, and I really like the idea of going that different route of here's brand new villains, and that way these new readers, like people who might be wanting to get in on the story, they have a point to go into, and and don't have to feel like I said, they're on the same level as the Avengers, because they're learning about them as we go. So I really like that aspect. And Ricky, I was curious, these are all brand new characters. What's your take on the villains and like these new enemies? I think they all look really interesting. I think CF Villa is killing it in his storytelling, and I think the designs are really cool too and interesting. What's your take on the villains?
First, CF Villa, like his artwork and style is great. It's very,
very good
animated. The art like just flows easily from panel to panel, so it's easy to read. It's great to look at. Very stylized and detailed. The villains, in Timeless, like they all have these unique designs, which are really cool. And I like how in both Timeless and then Avengers 3 and 4, you get a lot of individual moments with them, so that help differentiate them. Like already, like already in Avengers 4, like we were just introduced to these people, but you have a really good sense of who they are and like why they're doing this, and also why each Avenger is paired with them to fight them, because each one kind of mirrors their strengths and weaknesses in a way. Like I really liked the Wanda and the Dead. That was like a really good sequence with her. And then I forget its name, but the one Iron Man fights, who like loves changing city. I forget what is it?
Dude, mine was Godhead. That was really
cool.
Godhead
is a really like crazy,
really interesting, cool villain. I thought it was a very unique take.
So lots of neat stuff. And I do find it interesting that we're just introduced to this team in Timeless who are going to be, I assume, in the series, like later in the series. They're going to be the primary antagonists, but then just as quickly in the Avengers series, we're introduced to like a whole different team. So I kind of found it interesting, just like from reading in that perspective of like, well, I kind of want to see more of the other people, but
Sure.
um, again, though, like even though I have that thought, Jed McKay did a great job of like drawing you into like these new villains and making them interesting and unique from like the Knights Table and stuff. So
Yeah.
and again, really cool designs on each of them. So yeah,
It feels like Jed and CF Villa are a great team, and they seem to be gelling because there's definitely a synergy between, like, I think it's issue 3 where they take on the villains for the first time, and they
yeah,
each, like, every hero has like that. You have like that bottom. It's like only 3 panels, but it's like that one big green panel below where it's like almost like a or whatever, like a hero shot, like of them standing talking with the villain, kind of
mm,
explaining themselves a little bit. I thought it was really cool and done in a very cool way for people to get used to these characters and their personalities, and but in a very dramatic way too. So yeah, Chris, I was gonna get to you. Don't worry. What's your take on these villains?
Is Mirrodin a new character?
Pretty sure I've never seen him before.
Are you sure?
Hey, strike me down. I haven't read everything.
How much of Captain Britain have you read?
I mean, I know Merlin is a character, but Murden is not. Like, it's a.
Another name for Merlin.
I know,
is
but I think,
Mirrodin.
but I don't think they're related. I think Murden is a different timeline,
Especially with the way that the court is sort of structured and named after other Arthurian.
I've never, bro. I've never seen these characters before in my life.
No, I'm not saying that the court is a returning concept, but they're all named after Arthurian characters.
I think
And
here's my
Murden is
guess.
very close to Mirrodin, which was a name of Merlin.
Mirrodin, whatever. I can't pronounce anything. Honestly.
Did we blow open a reveal for a future issue just now where it's going to end up being Merlin?
I don't think so. I am almost positive that no, because there's obviously ties with Kang because they know Kang, and that's why I think it's not a variant either. I don't think.
yeah.
No, but I mean, Merlin in Captain Britain was part of the other world. It wouldn't surprise me at all if there was
if it is
ability to interact.
Well, this version of Merlin, whatever the name is, I think is this iteration, this design is all brand new, right? Here's what I'm going to say. My prediction is this, because when they I say they very specifically,
right?
When they show up and they are like, "What's up?" and King's like, "How are you going to my house?" Blah, 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 and gets all pissed off. I think Meriden, whatever her name is, they are tied with Kang, and I'm going to say it's Ravonna, whatever her name is. I think it's her.
Maybe.
I think it's a variant of his girlfriend who wants to get at Kang and be like the queen of the multiverse, or not queen, but like ruler of the multiverse. Because at the end of Timeless, you have her, or I say her, sorry, you have Meriden doing the whole chess piece. You see Kang, you see Doom. So there's bigger implications of what they're doing, and it's very. If you look at the character, it's very ambiguous of what if it's a man, woman, because man, women have different builds. Let's be real here, and the build for Meriden is not very. It's not very obvious. To me, it's almost designed a way where it's very ambiguous on purpose.
But the Ebony Blade was in Timeless, wasn't it?
I don't remember if it was. It might have been,
because the Merlin gave Whitman the Ebony Blade.
Yeah, but the Ebony Blade can be taken from any timeline, and that doesn't mean that
time is no object of Merlin.
I know, but so is like all these other. The reason I just don't think it is. I think Ravonna, whatever her name is, the girlfriend of Kang, the love interest of Kang. I think that's who it is. I think it's a variant of her, and she's trying to become the king and knows Kang and knows how to rule the multiverse because of Kang. and wants to have her own power. And that because to me, they've obviously have a vendetta against Kang, because Kang is after this unattainable moment, and who better to like be the foil for Kang than like his own love, right? Because he's kind of like Mr. Freeze in that way, and not literally, but his love life essentially drives the character, in a very weird way, a lot different than Freeze, but you get what I'm saying. So I think it makes.
We're gonna see what's gonna happen in the next.
Hey, if I'm wrong, I have no problem. But I think it to me is too obvious that I think it's a woman in some. It has to be a woman, I think, because it's too ambiguous of the costume. It's like too baggy, and it's just I don't know. I think
a woman.
Was that
Loki has been a woman?
Sure. If it's a Merlin version of that'd be kind of cool. I'd be down with that.
Yeah.
It's not Loki. Enchantress,
no, that's not what I'm saying. I was just
no. But I'm just saying, but I know what you're saying. I also know what you're saying too. So, but did you like these characters?
Yeah. I mean, look, you're talking about descending from, at least the way that I read it at the time, some of the most timeless legends that we tell ourselves in hushed tones of reverence, right? So the idea of taking the inspiration from that, but also throwing in someone who is as clearly driven as Kang is, it's a very unique sort of combination of a lot of different kinds of storytelling. So I'm all for it if it combines into something that feels unique once we're on the other side of it, then all the better. I don't feel like the Avengers have been necessarily confronted with a threat like that, at least in over the past like 25 years or so.
Yeah.
So go for it. Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I'm all for the potential idea that this does turn into something truly special. But as you alluded to at the beginning of at least my time in the conversation, it's hard to set a firm course based on so few issues that we have.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of oh, sorry, Chris.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say one of the things that I kind of picked up on, because you're right that it's too early to tell, like, where this series is going to go or how lasting it might be. But one thing that I picked on in Timeless and these issues was that aspects of it seemed a little like similar to me just from Hickman's run. Like instead of incursions, we have these crap, what were they called? The something events, the temporal events or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so it seemed like those things that can pop out at any time, and they're like the big events that Kang was referring to on this like journey. It seemed a little like that, like the incursions, and then a new team of villains, and this time like we have two teams of villains because we have our third like the Knights kind of group, and then we have the crap, I forget their name too, but the new group who's kind of like a combination of like the Black Swans and the Black Order. So like a couple similarities there that I thought were a little interesting.
Sure.
So,
but here, I'll tell you one big discrepancy between Hickman and McKay, and that is called not being able to jam everything in one book at once and actually make it like coherent.
Yeah,
which is probably Hickman's biggest flaw as a writer, and McKay is he's so fluid in his writing. And like again, like again, these books were very well paced. They draw you in. You get a good idea of the characters, and their histories, even with the little bit that McKay alludes to, without making the reader feel like overwhelmed at like exposition dump or the like in some cases 60
plus year history that
Yeah.
these people have. Especially like recently, you know, because now in the last decade, like characters like Captain Marvel and Sam Wilson, and Wanda's always been a big character, of course, but like
Yeah.
now that she's been so prominent in the last few MCU movies from, you know, Infinity War on, um, yeah, like you don't get that sense of like, oh, this is too big for me to understand. Like it's very easy, and he goes over it very quickly, and yeah, it's a big dive in, which yeah, makes it easy just to be along for the ride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll throw it to you guys and we'll wrap up here. Chris, would you recommend this as a good jumping on point for Avengers?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's clearly designed to be. And
Design and execution are two different things, as we both are aware of, right? So that's
yeah,
good. That's
but
good.
I mean,
That's good.
if you
That's a
have
good
the
recommendation.
intention of bringing people aboard, it's better to have that fulfill its purpose than something that's not intended to be a jumping on point and potentially losing people who might be predisposed to checking the book out. So the design to be a jumping on point works in this book's favor, I think, because McKay understands at least it seems, especially based on that first issue, he
Yeah.
set the table very well.
Mhm.
And that's not always a given in a number one. You know, you definitely need to have someone who can explain, get the exposition out of the way without drawing attention to the fact that it is exposition. And exposition in that first issue is rather light, but there's just enough that acknowledges what came before while still pushing forward, and it gets the question of the roster out of the way. I mean, how many
Mhm.
Justice League stories have I read where they spend the first year hashing the roster out? You know, it's
Mhm.
like, come on, just let's get to it. And they hit the
Yeah.
ground running, and that is a benefit of the book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a bit fun. It's like, you know, Jeff Johns' first Justice League arc, where each issue was, you know, like, oh yeah, here's this character, and then the next issue, here's this character. Like it takes a full 6 issues for the whole Justice League to be formed there. Where you know, like at the very beginning, you're kind of like, you know, yeah, let's build the team, but let's see them together soon. You know?
I mean, it became a little hard to be super patient, at least in that respect. But
Mhm.
also, too, I mean, look, I want this run to do well. This is a really interesting start. I'm not sure if I've ever really read anything that the first couple of issues made me think it was going to be timeless. I take that back. Philip Kennedy Johnson convinced me pretty quickly that he was the right guy for Superman.
we were just talking about World Saga before the show started, so
Yeah. So I do take that back, but that doesn't necessarily
Damn
negate the idea that, you know, I hope that this does well, and I hope that the story takes the characters to interesting places. Yeah, it's a solid jumping on point. If you've never read Avengers before, it gets enough of the preliminaries out of the way that you'll probably be able to get the lay of the land in terms of what's going on and what has happened with most of the core characters. Not all of them, but enough of them where I think you'll feel like you know what's going on. Having Timeless kind of lead into this arguably is a detriment. Like, obviously it's a necessary step for the long form narrative, but just in terms of like hitting the ground running with the team, you know, if someone got the idea that they needed to do legwork before they opened up the number one, that might be a little discouraging for some people, but not everybody. So yeah, check it out. I think it's cool, and you can always go back and read that stuff later if you're interested in it.
Yeah, I'd say like this is to me not. This is a great jumping on point, I think, for people to learn about Kang, the Avengers, kind of the history, and also meet some new villains and kind of get. I think it's to me
maybe new villains.
Yeah,
Maybe.
Well, whatever. Regardless,
Roman had a daughter.
Anyway, so
Roma. Yeah.
what I will say is I think Timeless is not. It's not asking a lot to read another. It's basically an issue and a half more than what the run is right now, which is at 4 issues. I think the 5th issue comes out this week or next week. So
It's tomorrow, actually, maybe.
yeah, so it hits tomorrow. So yeah, you're talking about like up to date. This is to me a great jumping on point to get into the Avengers comics. It's just solid, good stuff.
Go back to the
And-
Timeless cover for a second.
Sure.
Because if I were the copywriter for the cover here, the future of the Marvel Universe revealed, instead of that, I would have said the future of the Avengers is ... timeless.
Oh, I
Then
like
they
that
could have
actually.
led into it.
Yeah.
That's good.
Would have been cool.
So Ricky, would you recommend this for a good jumping out point for the Avengers?
Yeah, for sure. Because again, like, it doesn't burden you with like so much of their history, or all the stuff that happened the last run. Great beginning to draw new readers in, and especially with like some of the popular characters from the movies now that they might be able to recognize. So I would totally recommend it to either like well-seasoned comic readers or to like brand new ones.
Yeah. Right on. All right, man. Well, Ricky, tell us where they can find you, all your shenanigans at.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at RichardChurch16, and I write for Flickering Myth, doing lots of movie, TV reviews, sometimes comics as well there. Well, actually, I do try to do a lot of comic reviews there. So, you can follow my stuff there.
Right on, man. Right on. And Reverend, what we got on tap?
Discovery Debrief. We just published a new episode comparing the season finale of Strange New World Season 1 with a rather timeless episode of Star Trek the Original Series called Balance of Terror.
Nice.
We had a lot of fun with that, and cool comparison. And then, keep checking out the comic binge. We got a lot of interesting stuff on tap.
Next month's going to be crazy. I have to get caught up because I also have stuff with the other project you already know I'm doing, Chris, with you know who. I still got 2 things to read for that. I'm like, oh man, I got this. I got this. Then they have our slot retrospective with a Spidey Dude Network. Where I'm reading that again. It's got so much to read. It's a good problem to have. So especially with a kind of a bummer week coming. Couple days I'll tell you about in a second. So you probably know what it is, but anyway, go follow the Comic Binge on Twitter, Binge Comic, Instagram, all that stuff's below. Like the video, leave a love note, aka comment. Really appreciate everyone coming on. And why don't you take us out here, Reverend?
Read more comics.